We're on the Mishnah now, on the top of Daf Chav Zayin Amud Beis. Ein mochin es shel rabim liyochid. You're not allowed to sell a shul that's owned by the rabbin to an individual, and that would become his own private base knesset because of the principle of Mailim b'kodesh v'lo moridim b'kodesh. With nature moridim not so miktuchoso. Divrei Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Meir is of the opinion that even though a yachid is dedicating and devoting this place, this makom, to tefillah, but nevertheless, it's on a lower level than a beis knesset shel rab. Omru lo, the Chacham said to Rabbi Meir as a counter argument, it became af lo me'ir gdola le'ir ktana. If you're saying that the less number of people, the diminishing number, is morid b'kodesh, then suppose you have a larger city which has 500 mispalim, you have a smaller city, and you want to sell the beis knesses, use the money from the larger city to buy a beis knesses for a smaller city. That should be prohibited because it undermines the principle of Mailim b'kodesh. So the Gemara says, Shapir ka'omer le'Rabbanu Rabbi Meir. What would Rabbi Meir's counter argument be to the Chachamim? The Gemara answers, Me'ir gedolir katana me'ikar kedisha. There's no qualitative difference in the kedusha itself between that which serves a larger city and that smaller city, and therefore, as far as the Chal Shem Kodesh in the Beis HaKnesses of a larger city comparison to a smaller city, it's the same identical Chal Shem. However, mirabim liyochid, that's already a qualitative difference. And he's saying leka kedusha, meaning it's not the same quality of kedusha when you're going down, when you're talking about a beis knesset shel yochid. And therefore, for you to transfer the kedusha of a beis knesset gadol to a beis knesset katan, that's not a problem. But from a beis knesset shel rabbim to a beis knesset shel yochid, that is moridim b'kodesh. And when you make that tmura, that transfer from a beis knesset shel rabbim to that of a yochid, you are violating the principle of Mailim b'kodesh. You're being morid b'kodesh. An individual shul, it may have a minyan of 10 people. Maybe it doesn't even have a minyan of 10. So, for example, Rashi points out that if you don't have a minyan of 10 in your private beis haknesses, it's good that you have designated it for tefillah, but a davar shebekdusha you can't recite it. Ein davar shebekdusha pachos me'asara. So even if I grant you that there is kedusha to a beis knesset shel yochid, insofar as it's designated for tefillah purposes, nevertheless, it is substantially and qualitatively lower than the kedusha of a beis haknesset shel rabbin, because the whole kiyum of tzibur, which generates a special level of kedusha, is lacking in a beis knesset shel yochid. So Rabbi Meir is of the opinion, as we said before, that a beis knesset shel yochid has a lower level of kedusha than that of a beis knesset shel rabbim. But even a beis knesset shel yochid, which is designated for his personal tefillos, is no doubt kadosh. It has kedusha. It's not to be used for neosim and all these kind of profane matters that we'll get to soon. And this is all the opinion of the Ramban. The Meiri quotes other poskim who say that, according to Rabbi Meir, a beis knesset shel yochid doesn't have any kedusha. It's completely devoid of kedusha. You can do whatever you want. It is totally profane. Rabbanon. After all, the Rabbanon have to counter argument against Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Meir is making a fundamental distinction between two qualities of kedusha. So the Gemara says, as well. Mishum Karov Hadras Melech. So Rabbanan now, at this point, invoke a principle called Karov Hadras Melech, which is based on a pasuk in Mishlei. And they say that, you know what? If we're going to be concerned about lowering the level of kedusha, which was Rabbi Meir's argument, then even in the case when you sell a beis knesses in a larger city and use the damim, designate them, earmark them for a beis knesses in a smaller city, you are undermining the principle of Barom Hadras Melech. And when we daven in a synagogue, in a large city with Barov Am, that generates a greater Kedusha than davening in a smaller town where there's not much Barov Am. So according to Rabbi Meir, if you agree that you're allowed to sell a Beis Knesset in a larger city in order to erect a Beis Knesset in a smaller city, then you have to confess, therefore, that you are going down in a level of Kedusha from a Kedusha's Beis Knesset with a dimension and a kiyum of Barov Am to a Beis Knesset that's lacking in the kiyum of Barov Am. It's a small town. So once you're allowing that, then you should go one step further and be consistent and permit the transfer of Kedusha from a Beis Knesset Shel Rabim to a Beis Knesset Shel Yochid, because you admit and concede that there is Kedusha to even Beis Knesset Shel Yochid. Elamai, it's missing Barov Am Hachas Melech, but you yourself concede that you're allowed to transfer a Kedusha of a Beis Knesset of a larger city to a Beis Knesset of a smaller city. You're not worried about Barov Am Hachas Melech. But obviously, Rabbi Meir was not impressed by Barov Am Hachas Melech. He doesn't believe that Barov Am Hachas Melech is going to change the quality of the Kedushas Beis HaKnesses. What he disagrees with is the case of Beis Knesset Shel Yochid. That case, he says, there's really no substantial Kedusha. It's lacking a Davar Sheba Kedusha. Davar Sheba Kedusha requires Asara. If it's Beis Knesset Shel Yochid, you're lacking them. So therefore, when you reduce the Kedusha, which according to the Chachamim, they seem to allow for such a thing. For example, in the case of Beis Knesset Shel Rabim that's being sold for the purpose of Beis Knesset Shel Yochid, so why aren't the Chachamim concerned about the principle of Morid and B'Kodesh? And Rashi seems to imply that according to Chachamim, the issue of selling a Beis Knesset to transfer Kedusha over to the Daven that's something which can be used for any purpose except for 4 demeaning functions described in the next Mishnah. And therefore, the basic premise that the Kedusha of Beis HaKnesses cannot be removed is something that the Chachamim rejected. But Meir's view is that a Beis Knesset has the endowment of Kedusha Saguf. It's comparable to a Sefer Torah, and there's no way you can transfer its Kedusha unless you have an identical Kedusha. Okay, then, so for today, we're going to begin the Mishnah on Daf Chav Zayin Amud Beis, and this belongs to yesterday's Daf Yomi for Shabbos, but we didn't get a chance to fill that in, so we'll do that in Masechet now. So on Daf Chav Zayin Amud Beis, and we're up to the Mishnah, which is about 12 lines down from the top. Ein mochen Beis HaKnesses ela al Tanai. We're allowed to sell a Beis Knesset, according to Rabbi Meir, only if we add a Tanai. What is that Tanai? Shem Yirtzu Yachzeru. The Beis Knesset is being sold by the Shiva Tuvei Ha'ir, who are the official representatives of the city, and they are acting on behalf, as agents on behalf of the city. They have to stipulate in the Mechira that if at any point they will rescind their agreement and they want the Beis HaKnesses back in return, they will have the rights to do so. That has to be the built-in Tanai to permit the selling of a Beis HaKnesses. If the sale is without any Tanai, it's what we call an unconditional sale, that would be prohibited because that would be mafkia the Kedusha Beis HaKnesses. And moreover, we're going to see soon is that there's a rivet shaila, and Amru Lo, the Chachamim said to Rabbi Meir, Im Kain, Af Lo Meir, I'm sorry, but Chachamim Omrim, Mochrim Oso Mimkar Olam. You're allowed to sell a Beis Knesses unconditionally. Chutz me'arbad dvarim. However, even after we remove the Kedusha of the Beis HaKnesses by selling it and transferring the Kedusha over to the Damim, there are 4 demeaning activities that remain prohibited because of the vestige, what we call the Shirayim, or the residue of Kedusha in the Beis Knesses. And those are the following 4 activities. Number 1, the merchatz, can't use it for bathing purposes. Leburski, bursiki is a tannery. Tvila, you cannot make the Beis Knesses into a mikvah. And finally, lebeis hamayim, you can't do laundry, make a laundromat out of what used to be a Beis HaKnesses. And the Meiri has a different pshat here. He thinks that when the Mishnah says Beis Hamayim, it's referring to Meiraglayim, and that means a urinal. In any event, we see clearly that these activities are considered demeaning and inappropriate for that which once was a Beis HaKnesses. And it goes without saying, Rabosai, that today they sell a Beis Knesses for all sorts of avodah zarah. Places you can go in Bedford-Stuyvesant, you could see underneath the Getchka there, underneath the Salem, you can still see the outlining of a Magen David. I mean, that for sure is prohibited. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Mochrin Oso L'Shem Chotzer. He says that there's no problem in selling a Beis Knesses as a chotzer. A chotzer is not something that's demeaning. The activities you do in a chotzer are pretty much public activities. They're not like these private activities like bathing and going to a mikveh or using it as a Beis Hamayim. These are public kind of activities that are very appropriate and they're not demeaning. And he says that the buyer is allowed to use it in any way he wants. So let's just take a look at the note here to explain Rabbi Yehuda's Shita. He says that Rabbi Yehuda incorporates 2 points of halacha. On the one hand, he's machmir, and on the other hand, he's mekil. He's mekil in the following way: that he made a Tanai in the Beis HaKnesses, and that means that the sale of the Beis HaKnesses is ala Tanai, so that there's still Kedusha in the Beis HaKnesses. And those members of the town who, representing by the Zayin Tuvei Ir, sold the Beis HaKnesses, and they stipulated a Tanai that the shul, the Beis Knesses, could be used for anything that's not kodesh but is not demeaning, then that stipulation basically removes the kedusha of the Beis HaKnesses and just simply liberates it of all these prohibitions against profane activities, with the exception of the 4 demeaning activities. So Rabbi Yehuda points out that with this Tanai that we require, allowing the Kedushas Beis HaKnesses to be transferred over to the Damim and to be removed from the Beis HaKnesses itself, with that Tanai, there's a leniency, and that is you can use the Beis HaKnesses for what you want, but there's still an Isur to use it for these 4 categories. It's in that middle stage. It doesn't have Kedushas Beis HaKnesses in the full sense. You can use it for your profane activities as long as they're not demeaning. And then we have that residue of Kedusha in the Beis HaKnesses that we spoke about before. Now, what's this business about the time Im Yirtzu Yachziruhu Divrei Rabbi Meir? That's what we're going to now study in the Gemara. Well, Rabbi Meir, Hechi Dairiba, Ahavile Ribis. What happens now when the town agreed, and they represent, to sell a Beis HaKnesses on the condition that they can rescind the sale? They can back out and get the Beis HaKnesses back. Now, in the interim period, let's say there's time T1 when the sale was enacted, and there's time T2 which is, let's say, a month later, or whatever it was, when the townspeople want to rescind and void that mechira, that sale, and get back to Beis HaKnesses. During that month period of time, the money was paid to the town. The town is called the mocher, the seller. And the members of another town that bought the Beis HaKnesses, or for that matter, even a yachid, they are the buyers. They've been using this Beis HaKnesses for their own purposes over the last month. The monies are in the hands of the seller, meaning the townspeople that sold the Beis HaKnesses. So they're holding on to money. I'm sorry, just 1 second. Right. And they're holding on to the money. And now they're going to get the Beis HaKnesses back. But in the meantime, the buyer has enjoyed the benefit of the Beis HaKnesses, using it for his own purposes. And in that case, since the monies, right, the monies are now being returned to the buyer. Right? The buyer gave the monies over to the seller at time T1. Those monies are now being returned. And in effect, when the seller returns the money to the buyer, it becomes a loan, meaning he's now repaying a loan. He's basically been holding on to the funds of the buyer. Is that clear? And now he's returning those funds a month later. In a sense, the seller is paying the buyer for the use of his money. Right? The buyer allowed the seller to hold on to his money, but in return, not only is he going to get his money back when he returns to Beis HaKnesses, but he also has benefited from the Beis HaKnesses. It's almost like a rental where, you pay for use of a building. So that now the lokeach, the buyer, is getting back his money, but not only is he getting back his money, he gets more than the value of the money, because the hana, the benefits that he enjoyed during the last month, are worth something on the market. That's why we pay rental. So that's the Gemara's objection over here. When you add this Tanai of Almanashi Yachzeru, you are entering into the world of Isser Ribis. On Rabbi Yochanan, Rabbi Meir b'Shitas, Rabbi Yehuda Amara, the Amar Tzad Echad b'Ribis Mutter. There's a technical loophole here in the laws of Ribis, in which we circumvent the violation of the Isser Ribis because it's only Tzad Echad b'Ribis. Now, what makes this Tzad Echad b'Ribis? He says that, okay, it's a bit complicated. We'll try to see if we can do the best we can. He says the following. There are two possible ways that we can define the ultimate outcome of this mechira of the Beis HaKnesses. One is possible that although the seller had rights to null and void the sale, he never activated those rights. That's one possibility. In that case, everything is fine. There's no ribs. You sold the building, you got money in return, and that's it. The buyer has now full-fledged use of the building. However, let's talk about a different scenario. We had a Tanai here. Let's say the mocher activates the Tanai and nullifies the sale, which means that the money of the buyer that was in the hands of the seller for the last month was a loan. He's now repaying the loan to get back to Beis HaKnesses. Rabbi Yehuda holds that at the time of the sale, the possibility was that it would be an absolute sale and the seller would not activate his rights to nullify the sale, and there would be no ribis. So that's called tzad echad beribis. Even though it turned out that the seller did void the sale, gives back the money to the mocher, and the mocher in the meantime has benefited from the object, from in this case the Beis HaKnesset that he purchased. Nevertheless, that's not ribis according to Rabbi Yehuda, because that's tzad echad beribis. It could have been otherwise. It could have been an absolute sale without a tanai. The Sanya we learned in the Brayso, let's say Ruvain is the creditor and Shimon is the debtor. So Shimon owes a debt to Ruvain. The Asa lo sadeu mecher. Now the creditor, meaning the malveh, is a little bit nervous over here because he gave away his money and he got nothing in return. And he's hoping and praying that the loveh will pay him back. So what does he do? The loveh now sells a field to the malveh. And the malveh now is the proud owner holding possession of this field, of the orchard, of the loveh. And in the meantime, he's producing fruit and he's marketing the fruit. So this too is an issue of ribis. Why? Because when the loveh will repay the loan, the malveh turns out to get more than the loan. He gets the loan plus all the payros of the field that he ate in the meantime. Bisman shen mocher ochel payros mutter. Who actually has rights to eat the payros? We assume that when the loveh sells his field to the malveh has rights to eat the payros. No. That's an owner. That's ribis. But if the mocher, who's the loveh, retains rights to eat the payros, then the malveh got nothing more than his loan. There's no ribis. That's mutter. But lokeach ochel payros. If the creditor, meaning the malveh, eats the payros, awesome. That's a violation of the Isur ribis. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, afilu lokeach ochel payros mutter. Rabbi Yehuda says that it's very possible that they'll never, what's the word I want to use? They'll never actually void the sale. The sale will actually be a valid sale. And in such a case, the malveh got his money back in the form of a field that was given to him. And therefore, there's no ribis problem. So this is called tzad echad beribis. The Omer Rabbi Yehuda Ma'aseh B'Baitus Ben Zune, he wants to quote a story that happened to prove his shita. Shalasa Sadeu Mecher Al Pi Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah. He got the okay, the approval from the Gadol Hador for this kind of a setup, an arrangement in which the malveh received a field from the loveh as a sale. V'lokeach ochel payros hoya. And in that particular case of Baitus, it was actually the buyer, who's the malveh, who ate the payros. And isn't that a violation of ribis? Unless you're going to invoke the principle of tzad echad beribis lav ribis. Amrulei, misham raya. You didn't get the story right. Rabbi Yehuda, with all due respect, the facts of the story were such that the mocher, who's the loveh, retained for himself the rights to eat the payros. Now the Gemara says, "My beinayu." What is really the root of this machlokes here? Tzad echad beribis ika beinayu. Mar savar tzad echad beribis mutter. That's Rabbi Yehuda's kula, because it's only tzad echad. We don't know if they'll invalidate the sale. Umar savar tzad echad beribis asur. And now Rava comes up with an alternative explanation. The Kuli Alma Tzadecha Beribis also. Rabbi Yehuda agrees that Tzadecha Beribis is also. The machlokas here revolves around the issue of ribis almanas lahachzir. Mar savar ribis almanas lahachzir mutter, umar savar os. Okay, so now we have to try to figure out what is ribis almanas lahachzir. He says the following. According to Rava, even Rabbi Yehuda prohibits the buyer from keeping the produce in the event that the loan is repaid. And that's considered ribis, even though it's tzadechad ribis. So again, the tzadechad is that the lover will pay back the loan, get back his field, but in the meantime, the malva, in addition to getting back the return of his loan, he also ate the parents. That's us, even according to Rabbi Yehuda, that's us. So what was Rabbi Yehuda Megilla? Where did he find the leniency? He says, Rava, it's a case of ribis almanas lahachsi. According to the Chachamim, it's us. Whereas according to Rabbi Yehuda, it's mut. He says, Yesh bein Rabbi Yehuda v'chachamim, hainu, shamalva v'alova hisnu, shamalva yochal saperos, v'im lo yifra hachov, tehei asod shalamalva. Ach, im alova yifra basof, yachzer amalva l'lova tmei haperos shach. Zedochinami. The malva receives the field and he's allowed to eat the pears, but he's going to have to pay back for those pears. Is that ribis or it's not? Rabbi Yehuda says that's not ribis. The Tanai was that the malva, will pay back for the pears, which are ribis. So that's called almanas lahachsi. So let's say you borrow money from me and you give me pears, but the condition is that after you repay the loan, I will pay you back for the peros. It's almost like Rabbi Yehuda retroactively removes ribis, where the Chachamim say it's awesome, because at the time that I eat the peros, I'm getting benefit from the money that I lent you, and that's ribis. Okay, now we go on in the Mishnah. According to Chachamim, you're allowed to sell a Beis HaKnesses, an absolute, unconditional sale. Let's say Ruvain davens in a place, finishes his davening, and now Shimon has to urinate. He's allowed to urinate, but he has to be marchik esatzmo daled amos. I'm sorry, not according to Rabbi Yehuda or Shmuel. I skipped one step ahead of myself. That's going to be Rabbi Yosef. But according to Rabbi Yehuda or Shmuel, he's not allowed. Again, I make the same mistake again. According to Rabbi Yehuda, he's allowed to urinate very close to where Ruvain davened, because once Ruvain finishes his davening, there's no sanctity of a Beis HaKnesses to an open area. Rav Yosef, Rav Yossi says, wait a minute, let's take a look at a brisa. My kamashman to me, we have a brisa that says, Rav Yehuda Omer mochrin osa l'shum chotzer. You're allowed to sell a basic knesses as a chotzer. V'lokeach ma sheyirtze yasa. The lokech is allowed to do with it what he pleases. And the Gemara now is assuming an analogy between the status of a place that once was a basic knesses and subsequently was sold, and a place where you daven. And afilu Rabbanan lo kamri ela beis knesses, even though the Rabbanan disagree with Rabbi Yehuda, that's only with regard to the beis knesses. And even though you've, in effect, transferred the kedusha for the beis knesses, and it's no longer has kedusha as beis knesses, nevertheless it once had it, and therefore the Rabbanan are going to be machmer, you can't urinate there. However, that's only because the beis knesses had kedusha. That's called kviya kedusha sayu. Avol dalad amis lo kviya kedusha sayu lo. So in effect, Rabbi Yosef is agreeing with Rabbi Yehuda and Shmuel that after a person davens and he leaves, that place is not sanctified with kedusha beis knesses. There's no makom tefillah there. The fact that he davened there once on one occasion doesn't generate the status of makom tefillah, and therefore he's allowed to urinate. Tani Tane Kamei Rav Nachman. When I'm espalo marchik dalad amos umashtin. Now we have halach of dalad amos for urination, which means that if a person already davened, now says the brisa presented to Rav Nachman, if he himself wants to urinate, he's got to distance himself 4 amos. Mashtin dalad amos umispalin. So let's say a person urinates, and now he wants to daven. He's got to move himself a distance of 4 amos away from where he urinated. Amalei, Rav Nachman said to that Tana, I understand that if he urinates first. Nina, we have a Mishnah that says, how much does he have to distance himself from urine or from excrement? Before he davens, dalad amos elam ispalel. Marchik dalad amos umashtin. After he prayed, he has to be marchik himself dalad amos. He's already finished praying. I mean, again, if he urinated first and now he wants to pray there, then I understand the halacha of the brisa of harchaka. But here's a case where he davened, he finishes davening, gendig, finito. There's no kedusha. So why should he be marking dalad amos? Normally, why should he be marking dalad amos? So the Gemara says, "Ihachi." If you're telling me that just because Ba'ofen HaKroi on one particular occasion he davened in that place, that's going to generate sanctity, and therefore he's not allowed to urinate there, is Kidashtinu L'Kula Shvilut in Nardoi. Why don't we take the entire city of Nardoi and assume that, people davened here and there, they were stuck, it was almost Shkia, so they davened Mincha, I don't know where. The entire city should be also b'ashtana. You can't be mashtin anywhere in the city, because anywhere in the city potentially might be a place where somebody davened. So therefore, Tnei Yisher, you should change the reading of the brisa, and it means that he shouldn't urinate immediately after he davens. He should wait a little bit of time. And where does the dalad amos come in? Dalad amos is a shir in zman. How long does it take to walk dalad amos? Laman Zogid, it takes 15 seconds, 10 seconds, whatever it is. He should wait that period of 10 seconds before he urinates. So Bishleim Amashtin Yichek Kedei Hiluch Daladamas Bishum Nitzotos. I understand that the Brisa, according to Rav Nachman, tells me that after a person finishes urinating, he should not immediately daven because he may still have drops of urine that are coming out. Elam Ispalel Yishek Kedei Hiluch Daladamas Lamal. Once he finishes his davening, why should he wait as long as it takes to walk Daladamas in order to allow him to urinate? Lovely, why is it necessary? Amar Rav Ashi, Shekol Daladamas Tfilosos Dura Befiv. We're not dealing with an Isur in the Makom, but rather an Isur in the act of urinating. The Ashtana here is also why? Because within a short period of time after he davens, he's still continuing davening. He's not actually davening, but it's stura befiv, v'rechushe marachshan svasayim. His lips are, so to speak, whispering. He's moving, and he's continuing to daven for that 10-second period. Okay. Shalu Talmidov asked Rabbi Zakkai. Now we have a whole list of cases where they asked a certain elderly Tana or Amora, what was his chus, what was your merit that you got to live such a long life? But Meharachta Yomi, Amalahem, so Rabbi Zakkai responds, I don't know how old Rabbi Zakkai was. The Gemara doesn't tell us. I met a woman in Toronto who was 101. And she was climbing stairs. I think she died at the age of 104, if I remember correctly. Omalahem, miyamai lo ishtanti mayim b'tov dal amashel tefillah. He was very careful not to urinate within the amount of time it would take Daladamas after he finishes tefillah to walk Daladamas. So it seems that the assumption is that Meikar Adin, it would be mutter. But Rav Zakkai was machmir al atzmi. Lo kinisi shem lechaveri. And I never gave a nickname to my friend. So again, if we're talking about a pejorative name, they call him Baldy or Shorty or something like that, then for sure it's also, I don't need Rav Zakkai. But Rav Zakkai went beyond that, and he would not allow any nicknames. Below Bitalti, by the way, at the deeper level, it could be that the name of a person really reflects his essence. Below Bitalti Kiddush Hayom, that's a strange kind of statement. He never missed Kiddush on Shabbos day. What's the Kiddush here? So the Rashba says that he was makbid to make Kiddush on wine. He could have made Kiddush on bread. Imas Kena Haisal. Rav Zakkai reports that he had an elderly mother, Pama Achas, one time, Machra, Kippah Sheberosha. She knew how careful I was to be makbid to make Kiddush on wine. She sold the veil that she wore on her head in order to make the money to buy wine so that I could recite Kiddush. Tana Kishem Mesa, when Rav Zakkai's mother died, he nichalo gimel meos garve yain. She had 300 barrels of wine, which she left as a Yerusha. She bequeathed the inheritance of 300 barrels of wine to her son, Rabbi Zakkai, so that he would have a lifetime's supply of Kiddush. Tana Kishemesu, when Rabbi Zakkai himself died, Iniach lebanav shloshes alofim garveyah. Apparently, he was a great wine seller, and he left for them 3,000 barrels of wine. Rav Huna v'osa risa v'koi kamidarav. He had a certain kind of risa. Risa is a belt that is a very inexpensive belt, like Peter Pan kind of thing. It's made of grass. And he shows up in front of Rav wearing this belt. Amalei, so Rav was taken aback. My hi, where's your regular belt? Amalei, Rav Huna responds, Ohavili kidusha, I didn't have wine for Kiddush, umeshkante lehem hemyone. Hemyone is my belt. So I gave my belt as security for the loan because I needed to borrow the money to buy wine. Amalei, so Rav responds, Yehi Rava the titum b'shiroi. Right, Yehi Rava means Yehi Ratzon, may it be the will of God. The titum, you should cover b'shiroi. You should be always cover your body with silk. Ki ichlal Rava brei, at the wedding of his son Rava. Now watch this. Rav gave a tremendous bracha to Rav Huna. Rav Huna didn't return that bracha. We have a formula, I don't have to tell you this, that whenever someone gives you a bracha, you say v'gam lamar. And apparently Rav Huna neglected to respond with gam lamar. Now, when Rav Huna's son, by the name of Rabba, got married, Rav Huna inish gutzavi, Rav Huna was short, okay, you can take that out, it's not relevant. Gana apurye, he was sleeping on his bed. Asyan binase v'chalose, right, his daughters and his daughter-in-law came. Shulchan v'shadyan minayu aleh. So they covered Rav Huna while he was sleeping with silk garments. Adeitum b'shirayim, he was completely surrounded by shirayim. So apparently he bought silk garments when he became wealthy for the members of his family. And that means that the bracha that he got from Rav came to fruition. Shama Rav v'ikpid. Rav heard about it, and he was makpid. Omar my taimalo amartli ki birachtich v'chein lamar. Why did you fail to say v'chein lamar? Apparently that moment that I gave you bracha was a special moment precipitous of chesed shamayim, and that's why you became so wealthy. But why didn't you say v'gam lamar? Apparently I would have gotten wealthy as well. Oh, he says here the note, Rav admonished Rav Huna. Perhaps that moment was a time of divine favor, and the blessing that I bestowed upon you would have been fulfilled for me as well. Shalu Talmidov Es Rabbi Elazar ben Chamua. V'meherachta Yomi. Omalahem v'yomai lo asisi kapandrio lebeis hakneses. I never took a shortcut through a shul. Lo pasati al roshe am kadosh. The students were sitting very close, one near the other, and I never jumped over their heads. Which probably means that he did a circuitous route around the Talmidim. V'lo nasasi kapai below brach. So what's this about? Rabbi Elazar was a Kohen, and he never neglected to recite the bracha, Baruch atah Hashem she'ksharim v'knizrasa shel Aaron. So there's nothing extraordinary about this. All Kohanim are obligated to do so. But perhaps in the merit of reciting this benediction, all the Kohanim are granted longevity. Shalu Talmid Ves Rabbi Preda, Vameh Harachta Yomim, Ar Lahem Yomai Lo Kdamani Adam LeBeis HaMedrash. No one got there earlier than I did to the base HaMedrash. I opened up the doors of the study house, probably very early in the morning.